Amazing to have you on the show today, Julian. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to it as well.
This is one of the topics I'm most passionate about. I love peak performance, high performance, and what you call precise performance. So yeah, can't wait to dive into all of this.
I can talk about it all day. So, we immediately got along when we first got on here the first minute. I knew this is going to be good.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Same here. And yeah, it's true. It's a topic I can also talk about all day. So it's going to be a challenge to keep it in that 30 minutes. But let's get started. So first of all, how do you define precise performance?
Yeah, I use the word precise performance. It's a way of measuring. You're looking at your performance across the board, not even just as you're performing in business, but we have various roles in life that we have to perform as. Some of us have to perform as a wife, as a husband, as a mother, as a father. And so how are you performing in those things? So that's the first thing, is we have different roles in our life that we have to perform at. Now, let's measure each of those. And then the last part is, instead of giving blanketed advice, let's use food, for example. A lot of times with food, we tell everyone just to eat sweet potatoes or eat steak, and just tell everyone to do that. Well, we have this thing called genetics. And I know you had a previous episode a little bit on epigenetics. And so we're different. And that advice is not applicable maybe to me as it is to you. And the same thing is when it comes to being a good mother. What makes her a good mother, the tools and structure that she needs may not be applicable for you. And this is where we slow down and we dial it in, and we try to get precise as possible, because ultimately, as entrepreneurs, as very ambitious individuals with many roles in life, precision is a necessity, and it's ultimately about efficiency and effectiveness, and really reducing the times that you have to keep guessing and guessing and guessing. So we take a lot of preliminary work up front.
I love this. I think it's so important to narrow it down to what really matters and not just looking at the overall information that's available. Love what you said about epigenetics and the example with sweet potato and steak. For people who maybe didn't listen to my previous episode, though I'll put it in the show notes, and who don't know about epigenetics, how would you say they could go about discovering a bit more and understanding their bodies a bit more so that they can use epigenetics to optimize their performance?
Yeah, I would say start with a simple definition. First of all, it's just that when you hear epi and then genetics, epi means above, so it's above the genome. So but a better way that I like to explain it is, I like to think of a computer, right? You got the hardware, that's going to be your DNA, your genetics, and then you got the software, that's the epigenetics, and that software is going to ultimately direct how that computer hardware is going to operate. So in a practical sense, in the real world, how we think, how we eat, how we ultimately interact with the environment, it's constant communication. So it's not just food and exercise, but it's our vocation. It's everything, literally. And that's communicating with some genes being turned on, some genes being turned off. And in different cases, you want some genes to be turned off. In other cases, you want some genes to be turned on. So it's a dynamic interaction that we have with the environment around us. And I would think, before you even do any research, just think that I'm in control. My genes don't control my destiny. My genes are clues to my past of where I came from, but the epigenetics ultimately can mold my future, and I'm in control of that by the daily choices I make every day.
Okay, so how can you influence your epigenetics?
Well, simple things. The first one is to loneliness. Let's do an easy one. That's very applicable. Loneliness is highly inflammatory. Crazy, because I'm kind of a lone wolf. So this is why I'm very fascinated by this, because I can go off on my own, but socializing, having that community is a very important thing. It's one of the top 6 or 7 things on some of the research and books I've read on centenarians. And so, loneliness is highly inflammatory. That's something simple right there. Meditation can change a lot of genes positively. I believe if we give me a second here, I can find this here as I'm talking. It's a very fascinating study on meditation. And what they did was, I believe they meditated for about 6 weeks or so. And it was 2008. So it's a study published in PLOS ONE. 2,209 genes were expressed differently in long-term meditators. And of those 2,209 genes, 1,275 of those were up regulated, which is good. That's increased activity, and the 934 were down regulated. And this was an 8-week study, and they weren't sitting around all day just meditating. It was about 15 to 20 minutes of just meditation. So something that we all can do positively is meditation, and we all need that. And now when you get into food, that's highly specific, but I've never seen anyone that cannot benefit from olive oil and all the positive properties that it has in the polyphenols. So I usually tell everyone to shift over more to using monounsaturated fats like olive oil, more than just coconut oil. Nothing wrong with coconut oil, but it's just a easy switch to do with the monounsaturated fats and the olive oil.
Yes, meditation, 200%. I do my 20 minutes every day.
Yeah.
Yay. So I felt I had brownie points. But I would like to say for the audience that it took me, I was doing the math the other day when speaking with a friend, about 5 years to build a really consistent practice. So basically I would meditate a month, 2 months, 3 months, then stop a couple of months, a couple of weeks, then do a week and then stop. And now I've been meditating every single day for 20 minutes for about a year. But it took me 5 years to build that practice. I just want to say that for the people listening, thinking, oh, I don't have my 20 minutes. It took me a long time to build that consistency.
Absolutely. I'm not that way yet. Typically what I do is I would do 5, 5, 5, and 5. And I do that because it gives me like a halftime of my day, and it makes me stop. It's almost like going into the locker room if you're playing sports, right? And you're reconfiguring how the day's going, how the game plan's going and everything. So that's kind of what I use that for. Because if I don't have that, then I'm just going to keep doing things. And sometimes with my personality, I can do things. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the things I need to do, or if it's the things that's on my schedule. It's just the things that something attracted me to do it. So it's a good way for me to slow down, because I need to absolutely slow down. I have too much energy. So for listeners out there, 20 seems hard if you just do it in one chunk. So maybe just start off by blocking and doing small chunks at a time.
Absolutely. And when I began my meditation practice, I mean, one of the times I re-began it, in all honesty, was after reading Atomic Habits by James Clear. And I thought, okay, I'll re-begin again and do 2 minutes a day. So yeah, and then I built it up. But absolutely, I think that doing it small to begin with and doing throughout the day, I think is also really good. I tend to try and fit in meditation maybe before a coaching session or walking. But this leads me to think, what sort of habit, this is one example of a great habit, but what sort of habits can we put in place on a practical level to affect our epigenetics, to, modify our performance to a high level?
Yeah, I think the first one is I think about a mission, and you think about people who live a very long life, and at a very practical level, they have something to live for. And if you look at a lot of presidents in the States, they live a very long life, and it's a very stressful life. So it might be contradictory, because you see a president go in office you saw Obama, for example, go in with jet black hair, and now he's a silver fox. He has a bunch of gray hair. You saw, look at every president, even Bush and any president, right? But then they live pretty long lives typically. And you're like, wow, okay, that's a lot of stress. I know they're not getting their 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep and REM and deep sleep in a perfect ratio for all those years. Definitely not. What's going on? And part of that is, I just believe that they have a life force. They have something to live for. So a lot of times people say, when I get this age, I'm retiring. And that's no. Because then if you retire, what do you have to live for? And I think you energetically signal to your body, well, there's nothing left here. So I guess this is it. So have a mission. And as I tie it back around, one of the first things I do every morning is to directly connect with that mission. Before I get the day going, I have my 12-month vision for this year. And I even listened to it at night. So I recorded myself speaking, writing this out. It's like 1,500 words. It's a very nice letter. I'm speaking to future Julian. And what this does is, I notice with myself, I'm most anxious in the morning when I wake up compared to some people being anxious at night. So for me, I have to really center myself in the morning. So like, okay, calm down. So I have this mission here, and that's what I read. And I can listen to it as well as I'm brushing my teeth, getting ready. that's a slight form of meditation as well, because I've listened to it so much. So you're doing the thing that we mentioned previously, but you're also doing one of these other habits as well that people who live a very long time do, which is connecting with your mission and having a sense of purpose.
Yes, I think that's fascinating. And it's given me so many ideas already. I remember when I had a vision board. It's funny because I don't know if you have the same experience, because I know you've been in the field for a while, but I know that some stuff that I used to do when I began coaching, and I was all like, woohoo, this is so my thing. And I had like a vision board. And then after a while, it's like, I'm not doing a vision board. I have like a strategy board and I have like a few post-its, but somehow some of the stuff that when you discover it the first time, you think it's really cool and you do all of it. And then after a while, it's sort of like, but I think having that vision board that I used to wake up in the morning, and as I opened the bedroom door, I would see it. And I had like my 5 or 6 key goals, including having my coaching business and all the rest. And it was good because even at a glance, I'd be like, oh yeah, right. This is where I'm going. This is what inspires and energizes me.
Absolutely. And for some people, that's still beneficial to see the visual board. I like to hear, because then even if I'm running, sometimes I will just recite different things that's in that vision there, or I will recite different affirmations as well, because that's a great time when you're running and exercising to get some affirmations out. People might look at you strange if you start yelling a little too loud, but it's okay. It's happened before. I run with mouth tape at times as well, so I'm running with my mouth closed and stuff. So I'm okay being a weird ball. But those are 2 very simple things that we can all do. And of course, another thing is inflammation, managing that, keeping that down. And inflammation is not just from the foods we eat; it can also be from just really living a high stressful life. And as we kind of mentioned before, stress is not necessarily bad. It's only a detriment when we haven't learned how to mitigate it, because we actually need a little stress. Exercise is a stress. You would call that eustress, whereas the other type is distress. So stress is good. It has a bad reputation, but it's not a total villain. Maybe it's an anti-hero or something.
Okay, so we need a bit of stress, but not too much. It's true. Yeah, the exercise is stress. I on another podcast interview, I was interviewing Max Frenzel, and he spoke. He does Eudomia and stuff. He's really cool. Have you met him?
No, I haven't.
No, I always think sometimes people, because you were nodding, I was like, maybe like people just seem to know each other in this space, right, in this field. But I remember we spoke about cold showers, and I was saying how it's funny because I have the feeling it activates the parasympathetic nervous system because I feel so calm afterwards. And he said that maybe it was like that. It like overpowered. He wasn't sure about this, but it maybe overpowered the sympathetic one, as in a form of stress, like exercise. And then you feel calm. What are your thoughts on this?
Wow, you're lucky, because I feel like the cold shower for me, it feels a stressor. I do not like it. I do it a little bit, even the cold bath, but
cold bath, right?
Yeah, I think you just got yourself to a state to where you activated that parasympathetic. I think initially getting in there, I feel like since it was a shock to your system, I feel like the sympathetic definitely showed up, but you got yourself, whether it's through your breathing or maybe you don't even know how, but you got yourself to a state of relaxing, and it became almost therapeutic for you, and that triggered that parasympathetic response.
I wish that was true. No, I feel relaxed afterwards.
Okay.
It definitely feels like sometimes I shout and stuff. I'm like in the morning, but and I also don't do it for that long. I'd like to take them for longer, but I guess that's practice. But afterwards, I feel really calm and relaxed. That's what I meant.
Okay. Oh, okay. Definitely did. That makes sense. That's definitely parasympathetic, because then I think your body is overcompensating and bringing it back down after the response from the cold shower. So your body temperature is having to regulate itself back, and I think that's why you're feeling that. So that makes sense right there.
Is that the same with exercise? So is it? I mean, I assume it's the sympathetic nervous system when we're exercising, and parasympathetic when we relax.
I think with exercise, I think for the most part, that's what happens with exercise. Now you can overdo it, because I will say if I go for an extremely long run, I'm still feeling pretty cranked up and just high strung, right? Even like an intense workout as well. It takes a long time for me to come back down. But I do think that you still would have that type of response at some point. I think everyone's just going to be different, and it depends on the activity.
Interesting. In case some people in the audience don't know the term sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, I was about to explain them, but actually I've done that on another solo show episode. So maybe you could briefly explain them, Julian.
I just think of, when I think of sympathetic, it's flight or flight. It's basically if I'm running away from a tiger, it's giving me my adrenaline, or I'm getting ready to go to battle. And then when I think of parasympathetic, I think of I'm just relaxing, I'm digesting food, not being lazy, but I'm just comfortable. And the world we live in, most people are heavily skewed toward the sympathetic, heavily skewed. And I can speak from experience on this.
Yeah, me too, absolutely. And if you feel such a difference, the example you gave earlier about meditating 5 minutes a day here and there, that's such a great way to have a bit more balance and a bit more parasympathetic nervous system going on.
Yeah, or even if you don't, that's also a good time to maybe extend that to a 10-minute break, where 5 minutes for meditation, 10 minutes is to reread your vision or reread something that is going to keep you inspired or at least motivated to continue throughout the day. Because a lot of times motivation kind of wanes for me. I'm inherently lazy. I'm an inherently very lazy person. I seem very productive. That's just because I've put a lot of constraints in my life, because I know myself in and out. And I think really knowing how you operate and accepting that is one of the best health hacks that you can do. I think it's not talked about as much because it's hard to monetize something like that, but really understanding your own psychology and how you are wired it is such a relief. And it's one of the most powerful tools I have in my arsenal. It's just to know my own psychology, and it makes everything else easier.
Yeah, that gave me shivers. It's true. It's so powerful. When I started to understand the way I function, either through noticing my thought patterns, working with the coach, having conversations with my husband, seeing how my energy is during the day, knowing my Enneagram, all these things, I started to think, this is how I function time and time and time again on the same pattern. For instance, I'll give you an example and then you can share maybe one also. I noticed, for instance, I really love variety and I love change, like I'm hardwired for change and variety. So I would tend to sabotage my business when I had a process that was a good flow, that worked well, but it was always the same, right? Do this, reach out, and it was like steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is super useful to scale your business. But I would start to sabotage and do something different because I got bored. And my hack for that was, hey, I know I like variety, but I can have variety in other ways in my life, and I can have variety in the process. So for instance, my podcast I've had for over a year, I could have got bored, but it's every time a different guest. It's every time a different topic. So even though the medium is the same, I'm doing it differently. And I do new seasons, blah, blah, blah. So I'm using the fact that I love variety, but still keep that consistency. That's one way in which I noticed my psychology, I noticed my thought patterns, and I adapted my work to not sabotage my progress, but also not go against my love for variety. I'd love to hear an example, Johan.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way as what I did with my podcast. Is at the core, it's about wellness and health and business and marriages. But I had a country music singer on there. I've had a Broadway actress. I've had a governor, and I just kind of tied it all in. But it's really just my curiosity, because curiosity is one of my central driving forces in life. And one of the things I need to feel every day is growth. I need to have a sense of growth. So I always have to have something improving. So I even at night, I remind myself, where did you improve on today? What did you do today to improve? Just so I can remind myself, because when you're running a business, you have big goals, and there's always another step to climb. And sometimes we have a tendency to look 10 steps ahead, and we're like, wow, I'm really far away from those steps. I have no idea how I'm going to do that. And you just start to kind of marginalize what you've done so far. And so that's why I have that question in there, because at times I feel like, well, I haven't done anything. I mean, I wanted this thing that's 10 steps ahead. That's something. I haven't done anything. So that's one thing I've done. And then also with me, the more I work out, the more productive I am. Sounds very counterintuitive, but I like training 2 times a day, typically. Doesn't mean it's always an intense run and lift. Sometimes it's just a nice walk. But this goes back to me with constraints, and I'm also Parkinson's law. If I give myself a lot of time for something, I'm not going to get it done because I'm a procrastinator, and I kind of get the thrill of last minute deadlines. And that goes back even to medical school. That time I was there for the year is I would wait to the end, and then I would just cram. And you can't really do that in business, especially when you are looking to grow. And it's different than just taking a test. You can't cram business and so you get burned a few times. You're like, okay, I got to learn here. And so then I took another test called the Clifton Strengths Finder and then the BP10. And it basically told me how I do business, which makes sense. And like risk is one of my top strengths, is just taking risk, which makes sense. And going back to what we talked about earlier, like community and harmony and groups, I'm dead last in that. So I'm totally individualistic, and which is not a bad thing. It's just that when I want to solve a problem, I don't seek people. I go inward and just go find it myself. And then I come back out. And my number one strength was futuristic, which makes sense. And so when it comes to hiring now, I need people that are operational to complement me. So I need like a COO, people who their boots are on the ground. They're not in the clouds at all. That's what I need, because I'm in the clouds all the time. And so knowing those things, that's kind of a few examples right there.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I love this. And I love those examples in particular. Totally can identify with the Parkinson law. For the audience, I'll also put a link in the show notes. I did a solo show on that. But yeah, absolutely love the sort of the time and the work fills in the allotted time. And that's also a huge motivator for me. That's why I tend to put loads of deadlines, self-imposed deadlines on my calendar. Kind of what you do too, I guess.
Yeah, I have a few things in my head right now that I'm thinking like I need to add a deadline to that, because it hasn't been completed yet, and I've been meaning to do it, but I didn't have a deadline on it. So it's not a priority, right? Because you have all these other things that do have it, but you know that this is important as well. So, this is the gift and curse.
Yes, I mean, it makes you highly performant under pressure. So it means you can do really well, really fast, and be highly effective. But it also means that you can, that if you don't have that pressure, you don't do anything.
And you could probably sometimes stress the people out around you who are not like this. So you think about if you have a team, you have other people that are working with you, and you might get a thrill off, this is your big adrenaline rush, but for them, they're freaking out, they're stressed because they're the direct opposite of personalities. So that's where, we don't think about those things of how it affects those around us when we're in this. Because if you're on a deadline, you might be a little high strung or a little more intense, and that might come off the wrong way to the people around you.
That's true. That's a good point. That leads me back to what we were discussing earlier in terms of stress management. I'd love to hear your tips on, because I feel stress is highly inflammatory, but I also feel that if you have high levels of inflammation, you're more likely to be stressed. I feel there's a direct connection between them. What would you recommend to business owners who are feeling stressed to lower their levels of stress, aside from meditation? Because I think that's huge and super important, and we talked about it. So aside from meditation, what do you feel could help business owners to be less stressed?
I think the first thing is I would analyze just their whole workflow and look at their organization. And if they're feeling overwhelmed, is there something that you can take off the plate? Or if you can't take it off the plate now, you can at least know that this is the first thing that's going to come off the plate when the time comes. So that's kind of what I did. I was feeling overwhelmed about a lot of stuff, but I wasn't also in a position to where I could outsource that. So I still had to do it. But I at least gave myself the comfort of, I had a list of, okay, when the time comes, this is the first thing I'm getting rid of. That made me excited. So I would get my life organized, starting with business life as well. I mean, they intermingle with each other. So after you get organized, then you can start to plug in, how are you actually attending to your health? Because when we talk, a lot of guys, they hit the success paradox, right? And as you grow in business, you're getting more revenue, more success, but you're also taking on more responsibility. There's more people that are depending on you then. You still have your day-to-day responsibilities as well. So you're more in demand, and that's pulling you away. And the thing that gets left in the back burner unintentionally is your personal well-being and health. And so with this situation, it's not necessarily that you're neglecting your health. It's just that it just gets, unfortunately, on the chopping block because it's not top of awareness. And so that's where getting organized and then asking your questions. Am I really dialed in with my health? If not, what are those things? Is it an exercise problem? Or is it an eating problem? Or is it an eating issue that I need to look at? So which area of health is that? Or maybe it's my sleep. If it's sleep, and you've done episodes on that, maybe take some measures to work on going to bed at the right time, doing different sleep hygiene techniques. And I think looking at that before getting lost in the weeds or any tactical information about the type of the workout plan or the type of nutrition plan, assess your life, get that organized, and then see where your deficiencies are. And then you go from there.
So true. I have an acronym that I use called NEST. So nutrition, exercise, sleep, and timeout. I created it. Maybe other people have it, but I like this.
No, I
idea.
like it. I like it. I like it. Trademark it, get the TM, trademark it. I like it.
Trademark it, NEST. Yeah, well, I often get ideas for stuff like that. And it's really the fundamentals. For me, the timeout is what is meditation. So those are pretty much the 4 fields that I sort of check myself on, and also my clients when I work with them on this. So, how are you doing nutrition, exercise, sleep, meditation? Because I feel that if all of them are good, right? If you're getting deep sleep, quality and quantity, again, I feel quality matters more. So I know that if I tend to aim for 8.5 to 9 hours. I need quite a bit of sleep. Again, I think this is genetic because it's in my family. I've measured it. My husband needs exactly an hour less of sleep. I'm like, it's so unfair, but that's the way it is. But I've noticed that if I have 8 hours of super high quality sleep versus 9 hours, but maybe I ate a bit late in the evening, or maybe I'm a bit preoccupied with something, I'm more rested with the 8 hours than the 9. So quality. But yeah, so I check on sleep, then exercise, making sure my routine is there, and fitting in walk every lunch and exercise in the morning. And then nutrition. Nutrition is first, nutrition, exercise, sleep, and then meditation that's now on autopilot after 5 years. But the nutrition, actually, I want to dive into this, not the details of it, but I notice as a business owner, and I love what you said about success paradox, because the more input you have, and especially when you've been, struggling, like all entrepreneurs struggle, whether they say it or not, but let's say instead of struggling, getting that momentum and those clients, etc., and then it comes in, you're not going to turn it down. And you might reach a peak where suddenly all the efforts that you're doing pay off at the same moment. So you suddenly end up with too many clients or projects. And then for me, I know that nutrition was tough, not exactly nutrition as in what to eat healthy, but as in carving out the time and energy to especially like cook my own meals, because that's always healthier. So do you have some tips on how business owners can be more organized in terms of like meal prep and preparing their meals and all of that? Because I know that for me, that was harder than fitting in my exercise and meditation morning, and then my sleep. That for me, that's a must. I can't sacrifice sleep. So yeah. How do you do that? Actually, I'd be curious. How do you manage that?
So for me, I have pretty much uniform meals throughout the week. So I pretty much eat around the same thing every meal. So every morning I'm going to have my smoothie and with my oatmeal, because I know it's my smoothie is loaded with a lot of goodies, and then depending on the activity for the day, that depends on the servings of oatmeal. And then other than that, then it's going to be a type of meat. So usually a fish. I eat predominantly fish now, or chicken, and then vegetables, and then some type of carb, either rice or sweet potatoes, and then lots of veggies. And that's going to be my dinner as well. And then in between, I will have usually maybe a shake or something, another smoothie or something, or if I'm out and about in the city, I'll stop somewhere and just get some meat and some vegetables and go from there. So it's a pretty basic diet, and it's a lot of carbs because I run a lot and then also lift weights. So that portion is very individualistic for me, and for most people, what I would take out of that is breakfast could be the same. A lot of people are pretty good at breakfast. Dinner, they're pretty good as well. The struggle is the middle of the day. So what I usually tell people to do in the middle of the day, because you don't want to break your routine or everything, if you can, is to just look into what some of the meal delivery services. Because a lot of times people think meal delivery, like, I don't want all my meals catered for. Well, just look at lunch and have lunch catered for maybe Monday through Thursday, or maybe Monday through Friday, depending on your schedule and flow and everything. And what that does is you're basically streamlining your nutrition. You're stopping the likelihood of just grabbing something by convenience or something that's quick, or skipping a meal altogether. Skipping is not the worst thing, but typically when people skip a meal, they get what you call hangry or something. And then when you're really hungry, it's really hard to make the most optimal decision then. So we're just playing the odds here with that. So breakfast, I would always tell people, have at least 3 to 4 meals that are easy to make, quick in your head. You don't have to do a lot of thinking about, because you're probably thinking about a lot of things already. And then on the weekend, that's where you have fun and splurge and with different meals and go from that. That's typically what I do. So typically Friday or Saturday night, I go out for a nice dinner. But throughout the week, it's pretty much, I got my typical seasonings, got my olive oil, and it's just very functional.
Yeah, I think that's smart.
Yeah. And I think, because if you think about it, most of us eat the same thing a lot of times, whether we realize it or not. It's so a lot of it comes down to awareness, because a lot of people say this is a boring style of eating. And then you ask them, what do you normally eat? And they'll start reciting, and they're eating the same thing. They just don't realize it.
Yeah, it's true. I don't think there's that much variety, and you can, change the vegetables, or change, if
Yeah.
it's rice or sweet potato or
Mhm.
whatever. But yeah, I like this. I think being organized, I think it's reducing the decision making. I feel that
Mhm.
that's a tricky part. So I've been thinking recently that I'm going to, decide the week ahead. Maybe I'll do like a rotation, like week 1, these meals during the week, and then week
Mhm.
2, these meals, and then week 1, these meals, and week 2. And if you want to change, that's fine. But at least if you don't know what to do, you've got your thing. So that's super important. I feel we've gone through so many topics and we could talk like all day, but what would you like the audience to stay with? Because we're approaching the end of the episode. What would you like them to take away from you today?
I don't think I mentioned this yet, but another thing when we talk about energy, I would say be mindful of your environment and also your presentation. That is something I've actually been reading on more of, just like your image, and not from a superficial standpoint, but from a standpoint of something that you feel confident and powerful in. And I've read a couple books from image consultants on this, and then environment as well. Setting up your environment can give you energy, whether you realize it or not. So, and then the type of music. So when I woke up this morning, I had some classical music on, just to invoke feelings of peace and tranquility and calmness, to offset sometimes my anxiousness. So look at the small details throughout your day to day. And a lot of times those small details, those small things, those things are typically the things that can stop you from having okay energy to having optimal limitless energy.
Yes, absolutely. 200%. I agree with everything you say anyway, Julian. So it's not going to be a debate here, but yes, love it. And love the reminder also for myself, because I often reflect on the environment and how it affects me. So for example, when I record my podcast, like now I'm in my office, I have an office in a co-working space. And though I have window panes I can see on the corridor, but I can't see outside. And I do find that when I spend the whole day in here, I'm in like, a cubicle, and I don't have windows on the outside, I do notice it shifts my energy, artificial light and stuff. So I make an extra effort. I do, lunch walks, and I go out and, have a cup of tea and look outside, breathe some fresh air. But I think if you're not aware, it's so easy to just get locked in your cubicle, spend the whole day, and then you
Just
leave
sit.
and you feel funny,
Yeah. Yeah, you just sit and you don't feel energized. You just feel drained. Like, where did my day go? Even if you got stuff done, you just don't feel energized. So for me, that's why I go to a coffee shop typically almost every day for at least 2 hours, hour and a half or so, just to do a little work there. Because I like to be out and about. I like to be out and about amongst the people, because a lot of times I'm secluded. And if I don't have to talk to anyone, any live person in my day if I don't want to. But I kind of crave that because it energizes me.
Yeah, I'm with you with that. So yeah, 200% again on everything you say. Yeah, Thank you, Julian. You've shared so much, and I really, really enjoyed today's episode. It's a wonderful topic. There's so much about it, and hope that for you guys listening, that we've raised your awareness on the importance of all of this in your energy to optimize personal performance, professional performance. Yeah, it's so important.
Awesome to hear. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.